Hello, and welcome to the first of what I'm hoping is going to be an ongoing series of vlogs, in which my plan is just talk quite generally about making comics and being an indie comic creator. I've been wanting to make more video content for a while now, so no time like the present. I've been making comics for a few years now, namely my sci-fi series Flux, which I released the first issue of back in September 2020. So just over 4 years ago now, actually probably coming on to 4.5 years, and I'm now here working on issue 10. This roughly marks the halfway point of the Flux story that I'm telling, because I planned it on being a 20 issue series. So in that time since I've been making comics, I've done quite a few events, Comic Cons, that kind of thing, selling my books, and I absolutely love them. It's one of my favourite things to do since I've been making comics. Whenever I finish an event like Comic Con, I immediately want to know when the next one is and, get the next one booked in as soon as possible. But one of the things I've found doing those events is, especially at the larger ones, it happens a lot more regularly at the larger ones, is I do get people coming up to my table and asking me for advice, which always throws me. I'm never quite ready for it, and I never know quite what to say, because I don't necessarily feel I'm qualified to be giving out advice, even though I've been making comics for a few years, done quite a few issues. I still feel like I'm the one that should be asking, not giving. But it got me thinking about these videos and what sort of content I could make for them. And the first thing I want to talk about in one of these videos is not necessarily about giving out advice, but it is something that I do end up talking about with people when they ask me, if I've got any tips or advice for them. And it's because I see this come up as a debate quite often. And for me, it's kind of a non-debate, but I see this question come up quite a bit. And the question is, when it comes to comics, what's more important, story or artwork? And like I say, for me that's a non-debate, because they're both as important as each other. Comics are about storytelling through a visual medium, so story and art are as important as each other. And it just so happens I was watching a video not long ago of Todd McFarlane. For those of you that don't know who Todd McFarlane is, he is the creator of the comic Spawn, and he's also the current president of Image Comics. He's someone that's had much more experience and success than I have in the comics industry. And I watched this video of him doing a Q&A, and one of the questions he was asked was that question: what's more important in comics, the story or the artwork? And he didn't even hesitate. He fired off his answer straight away without having to think. He straight away said artwork. And normally I would say, far be it from me to argue with someone of his stature, of his experience. But I do disagree with him on this, because like I say, I believe them to be as important as each other. But if I were in a position where I had to rank one as more important than the other, I would say story is the most important thing. Comics are about telling a story. Now, his argument as to why artwork is the most important thing was that it's the artwork that sells the book. And to be honest, I do agree with him on that. The artwork does sell the book. I'm guilty of it myself. I've been in the bookshop and I've been flicking through graphic novels, through comics, and at a glance I have bought books based purely off the quality of the artwork, because it's had absolutely fantastic artwork in there. But what's happened too many times is I've bought a book based on the artwork, got it home, read it, and the story's left me feeling a bit meh. More often than not, that will have been book one of a series, but because the story hasn't lived up to the artwork and the story has let me down, I'm now not going to go back and buy book 2 or book 3 or 4, or depending how many books are in that series. So whereas I don't disagree that artwork sells the book at a glance, a good story is what gets people coming back for more. As someone that writes a series that is multiple issues, I hate the idea of someone buying issue 1 and not being engaged or entertained enough to want to come back for issue 2. You know, I want people to read my books and, you know, wonder what happens next and want to come back for more. So that's why, as far as I'm concerned, if I had to put one above the other, story versus artwork, for me, always story is king, because artwork can sell the book at a glance, story is what gets people coming back for more. So when I have people come up to me for advice, that's one of the things I'll tell them. I'll say, you know, you've got to make sure you've got a good story, a story that you believe in and have faith in, and, you know, you believe is worth telling. That said, I understand that is a very subjective thing. You know, it's very hard as a writer to know whether the story you're telling is good, because whether a story is good or bad is very much rooted in, you know, personal taste and opinion, and is a very subjective thing. So I guess what I should really say is the story that you're telling needs to be the best version of that story that it can be. You've got to make sure you spend the time refining it and ironing out all the kinks and making sure it is the best version of that story. One of the other things that I will also say to people when they come and ask me for advice is make sure you're writing for the correct target audience. And when you're making indie comics like this, you need to acknowledge that your target audience, first and foremost, should be yourself. You should be creating something that you would buy and read if you were to find it in your local bookshop or comic book store. And I know that sounds a bit like stating the obvious, but I have come across people that do approach making indie comics as sort of trying to tick boxes and follow certain trends and what they perceive to be popular and what they feel would be more successful. But the downside to that is, if those tick boxes and trends that you're following are not things that you would normally go for yourself, the process is not going to be enjoyable. And if you're making indie comics like I am, and you're doing it around a day job where you're giving up your evenings and weekends and all your spare time goes into it, you want to be sure that the process is enjoyable. And when I talk about this, I actually reference a Reuben song. If you don't know the band Reuben, I recommend checking them out. Sadly, they did break up some years ago, but they're a great band. And on their last album, they had a song called Agony Agatha. And it had a line in it, and I'm probably going to not get this quite right, it'll be more paraphrased, but the line goes something on the lines of, sometimes when I try to write songs, I imagine I turn the radio on and think about what I'd like to hear on it. And you can apply that same sort of message to making comics. Basically, when you set out to create something, think about what you would want to find in a bookstore or in a comic book store, and create something that you yourself would want to read, and treat yourself as your target audience first and foremost. Because if you set out to create something that you would love to read, there's a very good chance that there are others out there that would also love to read it, that have the same taste as you. So what are your thoughts on the whole story versus artwork debate? Do you agree with me that they're just as important as each other, or do you believe one is more important than the other? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have any ideas for things you'd like me to talk about or cover in future videos, also let me know in the comments. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Goodbye.